If you will consent to burden your soul with a vow that you should never make and a knowledge you should never dream about, I will promise you in return...
You will promise me in return...
I will promise you a very entertaining evening.
Your offer is far too idiotic to be declined. Permit me here and now to promise as a good comrade and a fellow artist that I will not report any of this, whatever it is, to the police.
I want to sign this band just to defeat you and to
punish you. So there was a bidding war.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can call it that, but it was more like a person. It was an art experience. It was more like a personal vendetta.
Game trolling.
Welcome to Abandoned Albums, the documentary podcast where we take a closer look at your favorite albums from yesterday, from today, and from tomorrow. I'm your host, Keith R. Higgins, and joining me, as always, is the original guitarist for Led Zeppelin, Jeff Calhoun.
It's true. Where's my check?
Good evening. Since we're all strangers to each other, let's get acquainted with a drink, shall we?
On this episode of Abandoned Albums, Keith and Jeff welcome Carrie Clark and Jeff Copas from the band 16 Deluxe into Thunderlove Studio.
Sixteen Deluxe is an American alternative rock band from Austin, Texas. They issued one album on Warner Brothers and several other full lengths on indie labels. 16 Deluxe disbanded in 2000 and reformed in 2010. And in 2012, 16 Deluxe were inducted into the Austin Chronicle's Austin Music Hall of Fame. Now, I say all of that and I read from the Wikipedia page to set what I consider to be a fairly bland and boring baseline for this group because they're much more than all of that to me. Although the Austin Hall of Fame bit is interesting. I certainly during my college years and even maybe a little bit past that did I made a lot of choices chemically that I don't know that I would endorse today, but lordy, some of those psychedelic moments. I think there's a type of band that aims their music at that psychedelic experience.
And this is one such psychedelic band.
Quite specifically and intentionally aimed at psychedelic experience. They loved a kid like me that had a giant pair of headphones and wanted shit to go whoosh, 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 whoosh. I think musically you can kind of seat them somewhere in between Sonic Youth and Yo La Tango. 16 Deluxe never seemed to gain that same level of success or notoriety. And I couldn't tell you why, Keith, because I think that's a damn fine band. These people wrote really memorable music that belongs next to the Breeders on a playlist in your Apple Shuffle.
Awesome. Let's get to it. Here's our conversation with Carrie and Jeff. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah.
I have a little bit of history with you lovely folks and remember so vividly. So, Keith, imagine being a student at the University of Alabama, and inclined to indulge in certain chemical recreations.
Okay, give me a moment. Got it.
Okay, I don't want to come off as an advocate, but there were some good times.
Okay.
And one of those good times was at a club called the Chucker with a band called 16 Deluxe.
Well, I think it's time for you to have your lysergic acid.
Let us observe the effect some 3 hours later.
Everything is in color, and I can feel the air. I can see it. I can see all the molecules. Oh, it's just like you're released or you're free, or I don't know how I can tell you.
There's this weird, new movement happening in rock and roll. The kids are calling grunge gaze. It's like part shoegaze, part grunge.
Ooh.
It's like shoegaze, but with a big muff.
Right. I've heard some of that.
You would thrive in this environment. You would be like the hottest new band in the world right now if you were.
We've come full circle. We're retro cool.
I like that. I like that retro cool.
I was thinking about the. Oh, go ahead, Carrie.
Oh, I was just gonna say it was like when your daughter was giving you a hard time about My Bloody Valentine, and then it's like, oh my God, if my dad knows My Bloody Valentine, then it can't be cool. My dad and I can't like the same thing.
My daughter is 15. She loves My Bloody Valentine through no influence of mine. Like, she just discovered it on her own, and then she found out that not only did I love them, but I had seen them, and we started a band based partly in because of our love for them. And she was like so disappointed because now they weren't cool anymore. In her mind, she was like, oh, so
you've ruined it for me, Dad.
Ruined it for me, Dad. I was like, sorry, I was cooler long before you were. I guilty as charged. She loves shoegaze. She loves all this kind of stuff. Again, completely on her own, just thanks to Spotify, thanks to the internet, thanks to this vast world, of musical knowledge that these kids all have at their fingertips. And just, I think just genetically or something was drawn to that genre. She just found her way to it organically. So
when you started 16 Deluxe in 1994, was there any notion of shoegaze as even a genre or something that you were interested in doing, or was it where did the sound come from for 16 Deluxe?
So I think it's just a mutual love of all things psychedelic and punk at the same time. It's funny because I was watching the series Pistol, and the Johnny Rotten, I hate Pink Floyd. It's like, but what if you love Johnny Rotten and Pink Floyd, holding them in equal regard and as close to your heart, right? So I think that's kind of where it comes from. It's just there's always not so much like grunge gaze, but definitely the Austin punk rock scene influenced us.
And back then, shoegaze was almost an entire. I mean, it was entirely a British phenomenon. There was no American equivalent, really. And for us, there was My Bloody Valentine, who we all were at the same My Bloody Valentine show in 1992. That virtually, just rearranged our DNA. Anybody that was there, including, 3 members of the band. And they were kind of in a genre. I didn't think of them as a shoegaze band. I thought of them as the second coming of whatever. They were just their own. They were their own thing entirely. Yeah. And anybody else pretending to be like them was, why even try to be like them? You're going to fall short, right? So that genre was this sort of foreign thing. In American bands, it was really, it was still mostly very grunge dominated, but we knew we didn't want to be that. We by 1994, grunge really was dying out. It was turning back into this macho dude trip, right? Yeah. Whereas Nirvana kind of opened the door for they always championed women in rock, they championed queer rock, they championed sort of openness and vulnerability. And then after they sort of flamed out and Kurt died, it kind of went back to being like the jock dudes, the metal dudes taking over, and grunge became very dude oriented. And we were like, yeah, we're not into that. We don't want to go that way.
That was like kind of a little bit more of the contemporary thing, like the Butthole Surfers, Ed Hall, Crust, the whole Trance Syndicate scene melded with, psychedelic rock, Pink Floyd style, right? But then there was also this definite love of glam rock, like T-Rex all the way, Cheap Trick, David Bowie, Big Star,
Roxy Music.
So there was the Sweet.
Don't forget the
definitely.
Sweet.
Can't forget the Sweet.
That's where the name comes from.
Yeah. And so it was like, so there's this current like punk psychedelic thing going on, but we all grew up on FM radio, ELO, it's like we all grew up, on a shag carpet in a living room somewhere. I was like sitting in my vinyl beanbag with my dad's big headphones on listening to ELO, so I think a lot of that comes through too. So there's a definite there's always been a definite pop sensibility, like just stuff that transports you in a way that pop songs can.
The through line for all of our stuff is like sort of pop music and not wanting to be like not too serious, but too like, we were never about being dark or being like
earnest
or morose. Like it was always about, let's serve the song, and let's do it in 3 minutes or 4 minutes at most. And let's give people, don't bore us, get to the chorus, let's have a song, right? Not just a jam. We were very, like, there was a whole thing going on in Texas at that time about, like, you talk about shoegaze. Okay, the Texas equivalent at that time was this whole space rock scene. Denton, North Texas, very enthralled with space rock, which was like bands with like even more pedals than we had, and but not necessarily playing songs, like doing like 30-minute, jams, which are, hey, great, cool. Everybody sit on the floor, trip out. And we were also like, we were kind of in that scene a little bit at the beginning. We were welcomed into it. And that whole scene, like, really was amazing to stumble on when we first went up there. But we very decidedly at that time also were like, we're not that. That's not what we're after. We don't want people sitting on the floor. We want everybody standing up and rocking out and having a good time, So we were a little more punk rock in that sense,
For sure. And like kind of going back to, we were all like dedicated fans to the music scene here in Austin, especially Trance Syndicate. I mean, back then Austin was just like, it was a very small, like, I would describe it more of like an art punk psychedelic garage scene, right? But it was really small. And so there were all these friends of ours or friends of friends that were in bands that were like, oh my God, that's so cool. That's so great. Wanting to be part of a scene that your friends are in, but the music that we brought to it was like, I mean, Crust, Ed Hall, Butthole Surfers, and then there's like some shiny, sparkly, Cheap Trick influence.
We loved all those bands, and we were, of course, proud to be a part of that whole scene. But like, again, we were like, we're not like, I think part of it too.
We're not like, that either.
We're not jammers, right? Like we can't jam for 30 minutes. Like we get bored. And maybe even it was like, we're not really good enough to jam for 30 minutes. Like I don't have the chops to like entertain people that long in some psychedelic meandering, it's all about the song. It's got to be a song. You got to have a verse, chorus, maybe a bridge if you're lucky, And so that was where we were really, I think that's what differentiated us from a lot of what was going on. We were like really into song. We were really into melody. We were really into like kind of catchiness. And Carrie has, a lot to do with that. Frenchie is as well from a different perspective as well.
Now back us up a little bit. Are you guys all from Texas?
No, actually, I grew up in California. I moved here in high school where I met Lyman, our first and fourth drummer. And then there's a really interesting backstory with Lyman of how Carrie met Lyman. So Lyman and I went to high school. Lyman goes off to the Army. I don't see him for several years. And then, Carrie.
I met Lyman in Manhattan, Kansas, the Little Apple, where Kansas State University is. So it's like the difference between Manhattan, Kansas and Lawrence, K-State, KU is like the difference between like College Station and UT. Right? So it's like a big cultural difference. And so there's a very, very small, tiny pod of weirdos that like cling to each other for dear life so we don't get our asses kicked by like some Kansas drunk frat boys. But anyway, so Lyman was in the Army and he and his friends that were into punk rock, it was all house parties. You know, I mean, in Austin, it was house parties too. Late 80s, lots of house parties. I met Lyman and I thought he was the coolest thing and fell in love. And then he said, well, I love Texas and you hate Kansas, so let's go to Texas. And so I ended up coming to Texas and meeting Jeff through Lyman.
And I've always wanted to know, did you get into University of Texas, like, was that by accident or by design?
That was by design. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's very telling that like I went into my first semester. So I started my junior year at UT. I went in with a 3.8 GPA and came out of my first year with a 2.5. And I spent the whole rest of my college career needing to fix that.
Yeah.
So, it was pretty telling.
She managed to make it.
I found my people, but I have forgotten about school.
Yeah,
it's funny how that works.
Yeah.
So we met so she came down to Austin to go to school.
89.
88, 89. And
89.
then me and Lyman were living in Houston.
I met you, though, in Houston.
Yeah.
Spring break 88.
Yeah. Lyman was drumming in this great Houston band called Sugar Shack, who you might have heard of, maybe not. But they were like a really great proto grunge band. They were tight with the guys from Mudhoney. So when Mudhoney came to town, they would play with Sugar Shack, and it was just a madhouse. It was amazing. And Lyman was Sugar Shack's drummer for a good while. But Lyman's that rare musician. He's the drummer. He was the drummer without a car, right? So what does a drummer without a car do? He has a friend who has a car, and I was the friend with the car, and Carrie as well too.
Yes,
so,
the girlfriend of the drummer and the friend of the drummer.
So I ended up being kind of Lyman's driver, taking him back and forth to Houston and Austin, and all points in between. And then eventually we're like, Houston's cool, but Austin's really where it's at. That's where Carrie was at. So that was really the draw, was like, hey man, I got to move to Austin because that's where Carrie is. And I was just like, yeah, I'm game. Let's go, and Ed Hall, he joined Ed Hall. So Ed Hall was in Austin. Carrie was in Austin. Why are we not in Austin?
Yeah, exactly. Let's get to Austin.
So that's how we all got there.
So let's talk about the velocity with which you entered the scene, because you've got a 7-inch. The Idea 7-inch comes out in, I'm not sure if it was released in 94 or early 95, but
it's like February 95.
Not even with a full-length album out, just the 7-inch, you find yourself on Spin Magazine's top 10 singles of the year for 1995. And then boom, it's happening, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was even before the single came out. I mean, we started playing around town, and before we'd even played out of Austin, people were already a few months in going, this is the next big thing. was weird for us because we were just, our goal when we started was we wanted to open for Ed Hall at Emos. Like that was the pinnacle of our goal, our career goals. Like
that
we
was
could open on a weekend at Emos. That would be amazing, because we'd all played in shitty bands that like you could never get a weekend gig at Emos. Like you always had to play Tuesday night or Monday night. The spin thing.
It felt particularly awkward, and I'm not speaking for you, Jeff, but I think you might relate to this, is that all of us were, like I said, we were dedicated music fans. Like we were like, we go to every show up front, buy the merch, just really enjoying being part of the scene. And then when that switched around, right?
Right.
It was for me, it was really disorienting because I wasn't used to that role. I was like the role of like super fan. And then it was really different.
I was thinking about this morning. We spent from like, I would say like 89 to up to 94 when the band started. Like that's a good 5 years where virtually all we did was go to shows in Austin every single night practically.
Yeah.
It didn't matter who it was. Road band, great, cool. Let's go local band. That's just what you did, and so we were just soaking it up. Me and Carrie we were roommates for a while in there, like around 91, 92. We were friends, sort of going in different circles off and on.
And then we both worked at Wheatsville.
Yeah, we both worked at Wheatsville Co-op, which is where most of Trance Syndicate worked at Wheatsville.
And David Yao started that. David Yao was the first punk rocker in the produce aisle. And so we're from a long tradition of punk rockers in the produce aisle.
To go from that to like suddenly being, all we wanted to do was we just wanted to be a part of it, right? We're like, hey, it'd be great to play with all these other bands that we love. And then suddenly we weren't, not only were we a part of it, but we became like getting all this attention and, backlash
there was a lot of backlash and there was a lot of discomfort. Again, it's like,
backlash how?
Okay, so this isn't like a mean backlash. This was just kind of like personal weirdness where it's like our entire goal was to open up for Ed Hall, right? And then pretty soon Ed Hall was opening up for us. Like when we went on tour, I just remember Chicago. We were opening for Ed Hall and everybody left after the 16 Deluxe show and it just felt really icky.
Yeah,
it kind of dulled the polish a little for me because it wasn't that I felt unworthy. I thought we were great. I was loving what we were doing, but it was just very awkward to be like opening for a band that you have thought was like one of the best things in the entire earth, for the last 4 or 5 years. And then like inside of like being a band for like less than a year.
Our first tour, one of our first tours was with them. I don't know if it was during that tour or after that, right after that, like during that time period. We played New York for the first time and we ended up in the New York Times,
Yeah.
Like we're getting like just all these things like laid in front of us. Like Gary from Ed Hall said everybody else is in their little boats with their fishing poles trying to land a fish. You guys are on some yacht and the marlins are like jumping up onto the boat. You're not even fishing. They're just like, and that was kind of what it was really. It was a great metaphor because it was like, we really weren't trying to like get a bunch of attention. We were just trying to play and have fun and do our thing. And like, even from that very first tour, A&R guys were following us around. Like, we'd go to LA or wherever and it would just be industry people, left and right. And we were just so innocent and kind of.
We were so out of our element.
And like, we're driving around. Keep in mind though, we're driving around in like, my beat up old van, making $100 a night, sleeping on floors. And if somebody goes like, hey, you want to go get Thai food? We're like, God, all I've had is Taco Bell for the last 2 weeks. Like, yeah, let's go get Thai food.
And then we go and have like a meal that is like more than like all of our rent put together.
And you don't even realize like, oh, this is some cool guy. I thought this was just some cool guy I met. It's like, the vice president of A&R for, whatever label. And that just kept happening over and over and over where we'd meet people in all these different places, naively, innocently just going like, hey, cool person, You know, want to smoke a joint and go eat Thai food? Cool. And then, lo and behold, it's like they're after us, right? It's the hunt was on like really early on, and it was again, like Carrie said, it was disorienting because like we really were not going into. We didn't have a manager. We didn't have a publicist or any of these things that you normally have to try to attract all those things, right? Most bands are like, let's build up some machine to like try to generate all this hype. We had none of that. We just went out and played, and all these things started happening. And we really, I don't know. It's weird to think back on it now. Like, I don't know how we didn't just fall apart and go crazy.
To some extent, the velocity carried you. So look at the overlap from, you've got the Idea single that obviously puts you on the map with Spin Magazine into Backfeed Magnet Babe, which is your first full length. Right. And I'm not sure, help me out with this. Now, when you go and if you stream Backfeed Magnet Babe, there's all sorts of lovely demos and outtakes and bonus type of stuff. But what it all points at is that several of the songs that were on Emit Showers of Sparks, you'd already kicked the tires on that first record.
Oh, yeah.
So you've got Giver, you've got Honey, you've got a lot of these songs kind of in your back pocket. I assume that you're touring on and playing. And then, you go from Backfeed Magnet Babe to Warner Brothers.
Well, we had one in between. We had a Pilot Knob, which was kind of like the Pilot Knob was weird. It was like our last attempt to like, we really wanted to do another indie rock record with Trance, but Trance was like, you guys are too toxic. Like you're like we won't.
I firmly believe now where it's like, live life with no regrets. But if I could tell my past self stuff that I know right now, it would have been to stay with Trance a little longer and listen to the advice of King Coffey, because he is a sage human being.
But let's unpack this a little bit. How are you toxic?
Well, I mean, it was Craig's words. It was King's partner in Trance. His word was, "You guys are like tainted now because of the major label association." We had all these major label people after us. It was sort of known that we hadn't signed to Warner Brothers yet, but it was like that was coming down the road, and it was kind of known that was going to happen. But what we had done in early '96 is we had said, we're not going to. We were like putting that off and putting it off and putting it off, and all we wanted to do was make another record and go out on tour. And we went to Trance and said, "Hey, can we record again for you guys? And we'll put it out. And we'll go on tour. And yes, down the road we're going to sign with Warner Brothers. Just put our cards on the table." And they were like, "Nah." They kind of moved on to other bands and other stuff. And so that was tough because that was like at that point. Then we were like, "All right, well now we're cut loose." Like now what do we do? So we went ahead and we put it out on our A&R guys label, and went ahead and toured anyway and did some other stuff and but it was definitely like a breaking point where it was like, okay, we kind of had our last shot to stay indie, but everybody around us was like, you guys go on, like you guys are going to be rock stars. It was already accepted wisdom that like we were going to be big rock stars and signed to a major label. So we were like, well, I guess we're going to be big rock stars and signed to a major label. That's what everybody says we're going to do,
Yeah.
And the offers were just insane. I mean, it was
ridiculous.
It was ridiculous. We're getting offered we got an offer at one point for like $1 million cash and 7 albums. Like $1 million. I think about that now. I'm like, what the hell? Like we would have all been dead within 6 months or something if we'd done that. But like they were it got to that point where these labels were trying to one up each other, and guys were like competing with each other because it was all guys mostly. They were like, I'm gonna sign them just so that asshole doesn't get to sign them.
Yeah.
Like that literally happened with Warner Brothers and Slash, where they were like, I want to sign this band just to defeat you and to punish you.
So there was a bidding war.
Well, I mean, I guess you can call it that, but it was more like a person. It was an art experience. It was more like a personal.
It was personal.
Is what it was.
It was like just that whole scene of A&R people and just the whole the LA-ness of it, like, you know, coming from, I mean, Austin, there's a lot of like really creepy things about Austin right now, but it's like back then it's like Austin's like a town. It's not even like a big city, right? And it's Texas, and all of us are, you know, we're Southern punk rock kids, right? At this point. And LA was just, it was hard for us to wrap our heads around going from DIY Trance Syndicate, where like you're doing everything yourself. Everything that you do is your own creative vision. Like it's all you, which is hard work, but it's also really awesome. And the LA thing was culture shock, you know, where it's like, oh, I can do things for you, you know. It was a very transactional relationships. That was new to me. Music relationships that were transactional or foreign, you know.
I think to our credit, like we turned down pretty much everything, and we went with Warner Brothers because we really liked the guy who had been at Slash. And we took like the smallest advance you could ask for in exchange for total creative freedom and a 2-album deal, which ended up being like the best thing we could have ever done.
Yeah.
And so I think, you know, we kind of beat ourselves up about a lot of this, but like we were smart enough to know like not to fall for the $1 million advance. The $1 million advance would have been 7 albums.
Would have had to pay that back.
They would have picked every song. They would have picked every video. They would have picked the producer. It was all that crap, all that typical machine Hollywood crap.
Do you remember what label it was where it's like, you know, I am not the girliest girl in the world. And at the time I was probably even less girly, you know, if they, them was a thing back then, I was definitely a they, them. And what label was it where it was just kind of like, we basically was like, we get to turn Carrie into whatever we wanted to. It's like clothes and
that
like
was
image.
Yeah.
And what label was that? I don't even remember.
It was American. Just
American. Okay.
It was a Rick Rubin deal.
Yeah.
Where they basically put $1 million on the table and said, "Here you go."
Yeah.
And
it was
just said,
like,
"No
what?
way, man." You know. Yeah, you can't really rewrite what happened, but like I think, given all the choices that we had, I think we made the wisest choice. And if we were going to go with a major label, going with Warner Bros. And going with that deal was so there was a little bit of wisdom in our part on
and
that
our two big contacts there, Randy and Rick.
Yeah.
They were great people.
Yeah.
Really good guys. So.
Yeah. And again, that goes back to the Austin thing, like you're talking about. Like the reason was because they felt like people that we knew and that we hung out with.
Yeah.
You know, they were just people that you could talk to and smoke a joint with and, you know, do whatever. Go get Thai food. It's always about Thai food back then.
It is about
like,
Thai food.
About Thai
God, I'm going to need pad Thai after this.
But that's how we made those decisions. We decided things on that very personal level, you know.
Yeah.
And, you know, for better or worse, right?
Hello there. A flood tide of filth is engulfing our country in the form of newsstand obscenity and is threatening to pervert an entire generation of our American children. We know that once a person is perverted, it is practically impossible for that person to adjust to normal attitudes.
I remember talking a long time ago to Adam Franklin from Swerve Driver about his tone and his affinity for unique guitar tunings. And he said, yeah, you know, I'm very interested in making a guitar sound not like a guitar. In 16 Deluxe, I hear an artistic endeavor to not make a guitar sound like a traditional guitar.
Yeah.
Some of that has to be intentional.
I think it's all super intentional. Frenchie had played guitar longer than I had and was totally like, you know, grew up Eddie Van Halen school of rock and roll, right? Like I'm going to sit on the end of my bed, like learning licks, whatever. And I'm like, I really want to make some noise and be part of a music scene. So I guess I'll learn how to play guitar because that's pretty cool. For Frenchie and I, there was just both this attraction to, I'm going to sound so fruity right now, but like transformative tone. We're both really into drone, the whole John Cale philosophy of drone and all of this and that. And playing guitar in a way that it's not so much what am I listening to, but like making a sound so that it's impossible to tell what you're listening to. It's it's totally intentional. And that all of even the straight up fuzz rock sounds like that. So I would typically play the rhythm stuff, right? Or the deeper, like rounder sounds, crunchier sounds, and Frenchie would normally hold down the swirly stuff. But all of that's just like super duper intentional, where it's like, well, what does the guitar sound like on the slider? Or what is a guitar, Angus Young, Malcolm Young, actually, rhythm guitar, thinking it's like, Kurt Cobain, right? Like Kurt Cobain's guitar sound, that is just, it's right. Or Mudhoney, right? Or early Flaming Lips, right? Where it's like, I like the way that guitar sound makes me feel. And I think Frenchie's the same with, I like the way all of this puts together how that makes me feel. So it's super intuitive. It's not a whole lot of brain picking things apart. It's like, what are sounds that move me? And I'm going to mess around with this shit until I find it.
And there was a lot of talk too about just what you're saying too. Like we would always have like 2 or 3 reference points. We're like, okay, do it like Mudhoney, but if Mudhoney was in My Bloody Valentine and they were also trying to try out for the Carpenters.
Yes.
That's how we would approach a sound. And then you would find the sound and go, that's it.
Yes.
That's it. It's got the Carpenters thing, but it's also Mudhoney, but it's also this. Like it could never just be one thing straightforward, because that would be boring and that would just be repetitive.
To that, we have so many overlapping musical interests and influences. And we're just nerds. We're music nerds. So it's like, we're just going to like pull all these different things, and the way that we just mashed them up, it's just a thing. It's the 16 Deluxe machine. We were joking like, whenever we do a cover song, cause we like doing cover songs. Oh, and Gordon Lightfoot, R.I.P. The last show that we played, we played Sundown, but it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, can we play this? Can we pull this off? And it's like, whatever song it is, it just goes through the 16 Deluxe machine and comes out sounding like us.
Is there a recording of that version of Sundown?
So I was thinking about this story this morning. We talked about our history, how we'd known each other. We'd been roommates. We'd gone to shows. I hadn't seen Carrie for a while. She was playing in a band called Swing Set, right? Swing Set. And Frenchie was playing in a band called Warm Jets. This is just a few months before 16 Deluxe. There's a show, I think it was December, maybe 93, at a bar called Chance's, which was a lesbian bar in Austin that was like really a great punk rock place, because they had a really open booking policy. If you couldn't play here and you couldn't play there, you could almost always get a gig at Chance's, right? So there was just a great scene there, a very welcoming scene. And so I think it was Warm Jets and Swing Set playing indoors at Chance's, right? And so that was the first time I saw Frenchie. Okay. And so here's this guy, he's playing with this band who they were okay, but like he was just he sounded like an airplane taking off. Like it was just unbelievable, the sound that he was making. And people were just like, oh my God, this guy is so loud. He's so out of control. And I was just like, yeah, this guy is out of control. I love it. And I don't care about the rest of the band. I'm watching this guy, right? And so I think they played first, if I remember correctly. And that was cool. I kind of filed that away. And then Swing Set comes up. And I haven't seen Carrie in a while, but she's been playing in this band, which was Owen from Cherubs, right, on bass, and John Paul on drums. We went on to play with Sean Lennon and all kinds of crazy people. And so here's my friend Carrie, and I'm like, cool, I'm going to watch this because, we'd played around together. And I'd seen you play a little bit, but never in a band and never in this way. And so I'll never forget this as long as I live. There's a moment, and it's like a movie moment. Imagine like a one bare spotlight on a stage. There's Carrie. She starts playing this song, and I'm like, oh, I know these words. What is this song?
Yes, that's all I said was yes.
Borealis, the Icy Skies at Night. I'm like, I know this song. What is this? And right as I figure out what it is, it goes from her just playing guitar to like the whole band just kicks in. And it's this amazing cover of Pocahontas that they did. And in that moment, my jaw kind of dropped. And this is a person I've known for like almost 5 years at this point. And I looked at Carrie, and I was like, oh my God, Carrie Clark is a fucking rock star. Like, it was the first time that dawned on me. And I got to say this honestly, from that moment on, like pretty much all I've ever wanted to do is be in a band with Carrie. Because that moment was just like, it was life-changing. And I saw it, and so for the next few months, I was just like, whatever I got to do, I'm going to be in a band with Carrie. Yeah. This is incredible,
It was a super group before its time. It got me really excited. And then once we got 16 Deluxe together, like, it was literally like a dream come true because, I had seen it. I saw that vision, but it was a cover song. And so it wasn't one of your songs. It wasn't one of the band songs. It was this cover song, and it was done in a way that you would have never expected. This quiet little acoustic folky song, and it just turned into like this rock and roll powerhouse, and it flipped the whole script on it, And anyway, sorry, I had to get that story in.
We've talked about a lot of other bands and psychedelic, and I think psychedelic can mean a lot of different musically. Psychedelic can cover a pretty broad spectrum. These are your words. I assume you, Jeff, probably wrote this. A kinetic mix of sonic assault, pop melodies, smoke, lights, and film projections. You describe yourself as a deafening live performance and lysergic studio creations.
I think I stole some of that from the internet early on, but yeah, probably some uncredited text there that needs to be credited, but yeah, no, that's
the word lysergic stands out to me.
oh yeah.
It was the late 80s and early 90s, and again, not advocating.
I'm here to advocate for it, so I will go out on the limb and say that.
Let's just say it gave me perspective that I can use for the rest of my life. And it also led to like some really great shows, like going to see the Jesus Lizard,
Butthole Surfers,
Altered State, Butthole Surfers, Sonic Youth, Flaming Lips. Like, so remember when we said we went to shows like almost every night? So it was like almost every night there was multiple journeys taken.
I've never seen such infinite beauty in my life. I mean, can't you feel it? Everything is so beautiful and lovely and alive. I wish I could talk in Technicolor.
As folks who have experimented and know the magic that is a good pair of headphones and a nice stereo mix, I will confess, Keith, one of the reasons that I sought these folks out is that I've put a song, and not always the same song, but I've put a song from the album Amidst Showers of Sparks on countless mixtapes. It's really close to home for me, and I think that there are some lysergic experiments on that record that were very successful.
Thank you. That's good to hear, because that one was really like, we were definitely mixing that one for the hallucinations. We're trying to anyway, and we wanted to make a big rock record, but we also wanted it to sound
I think
like us.
Too, it was like at that time too, we had enough experiences in recording studios to become comfortable, and Jeff, you and Frenchie, and I guess Steve, you guys were just all really just honing in on the audio production. You guys are like total engineering nerds and just enjoying, what does that do? Well, what's that over there? And what does that do? And what does that do? And we had this opportunity to work in studios that had a lot of really good gear and people who knew how to use it. And we were curious about mashing buttons. It's like, what happens if you mash them all at the same time? And we were working with people where it's like, I don't know, let's find out. So there's definitely that again, just like a lot of playfulness and curiosity, where it's just like
we could never settle for something sounding too normal. Yeah. Like anytime things got too close to normal, we would go, nah, you got to dirty that up. We got to fuck that up somehow.
So let's talk about a couple of specific tunes off of that record, because again, it wasn't just the one song that stuck with me. I think it's as an album, it's a really beautiful body of work. But Giver was what, at least at the University of Alabama, that was the song that we all kind of latched onto as like, that's probably the lead single.
Yeah.
Well, that goes back to the very first days of the first batch of songs we had, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think Giver might have been an outlier swing set song, because there were Baby Head Rush and Giver, I think, were songs that I was just like, I need to find the right people to play these songs. And I found the right people to play those songs. Nobody had ever done that. It's like, I don't know. Can we loop drums? Can we like run half of this stuff backwards? It's like, sure, let's do it. So again, it's like the material too, we were super familiar with. So we're headed into a studio, like to us, studios of like all of these resources with songs that we had played a million times because we'd been touring so much. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that definitely helped that record.
We were really tight when I think we tracked everything in just the first couple of days. All the basic tracks were done real fast, and then it was just layering guitars, layering vocals, all that. But it took a turn. I mean, on that version, I think we did try to go to a little more of like a dance groove. Whereas before it had been like, it started out as like the immigrant song, like just this, And then by the time you get to Amidst Showers of Sparks, it's got a groove to it. Steven has a lot to do with that. Steven loves his Manchester and loves his groove, and he can do that groove and do it well. So it was just a natural evolution.
When you're tracking the record and sequencing the record, as it comes to completion, do you remember what made Sniffy Woe stand out as the lead, as the first song?
I just
oh my gosh,
laugh every time I think of that song.
Smiling. You know that you are wanted inside. Don't slow it down. Wanting to drown, I just slide.
Wrote that right before we went to record, right? That is one that was actually
because it was
not very old.
Written on tour after a trip to the Lusty Lady.
A trip?
Have you ever been to the Lusty Lady?
I confess I have not.
The Lusty Lady is an all female owned peep show, and so a lot of the edgier, more free-spirited punk rock girls would dance there. And so, but it was like old school peep show. You could either have a guy and a girl in one of the rooms if you're going to have two people or two girls, right? And you literally put in dollars or quarters, and the little thing, the little shade lifts up, and all the girlies are dancing naked with like lights and mirrors and everything. And they would come up to you and go, I saw you at the show last night. Here's my vagina. I was with Jacob, and we had Keith Cleversley of like Flaming Lips, Mercury Rev, MGMT fame. We had stopped at his house on that tour, and he had given Jacob and I some rather large capsules of ecstasy that he said was pretty old, and he wasn't sure if they were going to do anything. So we played at, was it Great American Music Hall? Where did we play that night? The place with a really great bar, wooden carving and everything.
I think it was Great American, yeah.
Anyway, we took 2 hits of those ecstasies because the one wasn't working. And then we went to the peep show and were inspired by the Naked Dancing Girls. And it made me think of Mark Bolan. And so that's why I always smile when I think of that song.
That's quite a backstory, Carrie.
And we kind of thought Purple was the single. And so we were like, well, Purple can't be first because you never put the single first. You got to have, single has to be like second or third or fourth.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Carrie drops an F-bomb in Purple, right?
Yeah.
She does. And that's, again, brilliant career move on our part. Like, let's make the single have an F-bomb in it. But we did a radio edit, so.
The song that I probably listened to most off of that record, because it was the soundtrack for a particular event where I had a hexagonal fish tank in my apartment. And suddenly the whole apartment was full of goldfish. And the song Honey provided a very drippy soundtrack to this moment in my life. Very, very memorable.
Mission accomplished.
Mission accomplished indeed, because I think even to this day, I listen to that and I have mild flashbacks, very pleasant, mild moments where I go, oh yeah, I remember that. That shit was crazy.
Our work is done here.
On the first single, Ideas on one side and Honey's on the other side. And it was so early in our career that it was like, that was the quintessential Carrie wrote this song and Frenchie wrote this song. And so that's like the two bookends of 16 Deluxe are really those two songs, because Honey was a song that Frenchie probably brought over from Warm Jets, and Idea was one that I had brought over. So
isn't that interesting?
Therein lies 16 Deluxe, everything from Idea to Honey and back, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the template, really, for everything that goes forward.
All subjects escaped from the Clinton County Correction Facility in Dannemora. Unknown direction of travel.
You guys asked to be released from your Warner Brothers contract. Is that right?
Yeah, so after we, we had... Where do I go with this even? The album came out, we did a tour. There was support there. There was backing there. Then we had another tour booked, and we were like, we had to put the brakes on everything and just stop. And we stopped, and we were like, look, we're going to go back out on the road in like 2 months. Just give us a break, and we'll be back on the road. Well, 2 months go by, and we get a tour with Jesus and Mary Chain opening, right? And we go to Warner Brothers, and they're like, no, we're done. We're moving on. The cycle for this record is over. So we went on tour anyway, on our own dime,
Because who's going to say no to opening for Jesus and Mary Chain?
Exactly. We're like, we're going on tour with Jesus and Mary Chain.
Right.
And we did a bunch more touring later that summer and into the fall, again, with like almost no support from them other than what our manager could squeeze out of them.
This sucks.
And so at that point we were like, man, what a disappointment. This sucks. And then our A&R guy kind of stopped returning our calls. He was come to find out, he was getting edged out. He had a new boss, and so I'd kind of lost his position of power.
Oh, wasn't it like that? Wasn't that the era of rock and roll is dead? Nobody's listening to rock and roll anymore.
It was, it'd be late 98. You're talking, that's the year of electronica, right? Everybody's going to electronica. Everything's going away from guitar. Warner Brothers went through this huge shift from Stephen Baker and the old guard, the old Mo Austin people and all that. They all died off and went away. And so you had a sort of new regime, and our guy was no longer sort of powerful. He still should return our calls because he was our friend, man. Like we thought we were friends, man. But he wouldn't return our calls. But we got our revenge. We did a prank call and put it on our next record. So, but it's a hidden gem on our last album. But anyway, we had the great foresight to have one of the best lawyers in all of rock and roll, Brian McPherson, who was Beck's attorney and lots of other people's attorney. And he, again, going back to that conversation we had earlier, we turned down a lot of really big, shiny, stupid things in exchange for a really smart contract that gave us sort of less money up front, but gave us a guarantee. So we had a guaranteed 2-album deal. And so he went to them and just said, look, we know you guys are done with this band. they can put out they can go record another record, and they're ready to go record another record. And you guys can put it out and do nothing with it. Or you could just give us the money and we'll go away. What do you want to do? And amazingly, they were like, we'll just give you the money. And so they basically paid us for a second album that we didn't do, except we did do it. We went and did it on our own and put it out on an indie label and went back on the road and built a studio. So, which continues in some form to this day. The Bubble started back then. It's gone through like multiple iterations over the years, and Frenchie has been the constant through it all. And so,
What record was that? Was that Vision Take Me or was that Moon Man?
Well, it's both, actually. We recorded both during that time.
During that time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love Moon Man. Moon Man's my personal favorite of all of our recordings. Just, I don't know. I think the way that I'm super happy with all the guitar tones. I'm super happy with like whatever, like visceral feelings with the tones and just gratuitous tons of vocals. I really, really like that. That's probably the album where it's like, if I was going to, wish that, well, not wish. I mean, Emmett's is a great record, but I wish it were a little bit noisier.
Oh,
yeah. We kind of took everything we learned up to that point, and then at that time, Frenchie and Steven were really getting into the studio and recording ourselves, right? And we actually recorded with Mike McCarthy as well, who was working with Spoon and Trail of Dead and all those guys. And so we were kind of mixing all that together, and we just really got into the whole idea of like using the studio as an instrument, right? Of being like a very experimental kind of studio band again. Or not again, but like really for the first time, kind of what we'd always wanted to be. We'd always been really a live band. Up to that point, we hadn't spent a lot of time in the studio other than what we could, the first album, we did it in like 2 days or something. Pilot Knob, we did with another band, just sort of with Crust kind of controlling. Crust. We just showed up and played, and, so it was really we had all the time in the world at that point to just record and do endless amounts of creative work.
And we weren't really telling other people what we wanted. It's through all of that other experience, through all the button mashing with the other people. It's like now the band knew how to do that. We didn't need a third person or an outside entity to go, I want this to sound like this. Oh, well, we just do this, and we'll mic it this way, and we'll put this compression on it and go. And it's like, that's it. Because
we get to sound like us. Yeah. And again, Frenchie had a lot to do with that, of being able to realize that vision, right? Because he knew what was in our heads, and he was figuring out at that point, it was pretty early on, but like he was figuring out how to get those sounds onto tape that we all had in our heads that we couldn't really communicate to anybody else, but he knew because he was of it, he was in it, and we were all a part of it. And so, that was a really creative peak at that time.
Is it Sebastian? Sebastian.
He's a drummer from Boston. I don't even know how did that end up being the title?
I don't know. It was
We
like
just
that
love
era of like bands would just name songs, just certain things that didn't have anything to do with anything. And I'm sure that we were going down some sort of classic rock rabbit hole and discovered Sib Hashian's afro, and some probably became obsessed with Sib Hashian for like a few weeks.
The last song was going to be called Our Waiter Brian Eno, because there was a restaurant in Seattle. The Crocodile, yeah, the club. And there was a waiter there, and he looked exactly like Brian Eno of 1972. And so we were like, well, we have to write a song about this guy. There's no choice. You have to write a song about this guy. So
let's briefly talk about the decision to break up. It's 99, 2000.
Somewhere in 2000.
Somewhere around there. And I think that, I guess from a sales pitch perspective, if I were to say to someone, I've got a band that's, somewhere between Sonic Youth and Yola Tango, that sales pitch, whereas in 95, everybody's buying that.
Right.
In 2000, nobody's buying that.
Yeah.
So the decision to just let's not chase this dream anymore.
Well, okay, so everything, like we had talked about all of the intensity up to this point, and it was everything that 16 Deluxe had done. It was just like everything was just hard and fast, and a candle can't burn that bright for that long, and we just.
I feel like we lived 20 years in 5.
Yeah.
Really, when I look back on it,
it was just really hard, and we needed to get off that train.
I jumped ship first, but I gotta say, like I think I felt that pressure. I think we were all feeling that pressure around late into 99.
Yeah.
We were realizing, like, we thought, okay, well, we'll just go back to being an indie rock band. And it was like, well, the indie rock terrain was shifting away from guitar rock, like you were saying, and it was really a generational shift. Like, you wait another 2 years, right? And you've got White Stripes and Strokes, and it's 2001, and it's a whole new generation of rock. Right?
Yeah.
And that era, our era of rock, the 90s era of rock, really was dying out then. And you could feel it kind of, I could feel it on that last couple of tours. Audiences were getting smaller, and it was just kind of the same people. And, we didn't have the big machine behind us anymore of like a major label or even a big indie label. And so it was just kind of like, well, where do we go from here?
It was work. It was really, really hard work. And it was kind of like, yeah. So there's all this work that you do at the beginning of any band or any project that you're really passionate about. And the work is easy because that's all you want to do is that work. And, you're 24 and working at Wheatsville. What else are you going to do? Fast forward, you're like 29, almost 30. And I personally have been living in a van with like 6 guys.
You're like, is this what I want to do for the rest of my life?
Is this really what I want to be doing?
Or even for the next 5 years, is this what I want to do in my life? Or 2 years.
It was, I think it was just like a perfect storm, and it was just time for everybody just to go regroup. What is it that I want out of life? Because this right now feels like a lot of work for not much return.
Happy ending, dear listener. Let's fast forward through a decade, and I think, and Jeff, you're kind of the band historian, I think. So set me straight on this if I'm wrong. 2012, you are inducted into the Austin Rock Hall of Fame for local rock and roll.
It's true. But yeah, we got back together in 2010. So me and Carrie, like, kind of never, I think we took a year or two off. I moved to California for a while. But as soon as I came back,
so we took a year off of our relationship, and you were in California.
We started playing music together again in like 2003, 2004. We started doing recording stuff,
like
with a friend of ours,
pretty quickly.
And then we had a band called The Hit Space for one. We made like one EP, and then we started the Elevated Lines project with Matt Matt Devine, a great singer-songwriter who's been in bands like Permanent Green Light and Medicine, other bands like that. He's a really good friend of ours who we met in '95 when we were touring.
When he was playing with Medicine.
Touring with Medicine. And so we'd always been friends and stayed in touch. And he ended up moving to Austin. And so the three of us kind of became the nucleus of this group, of this project called Elevated Lines, which brought in a lot of other people, mostly just studio stuff. And so that, we just kind of kept moving along with different things. And 16 Deluxe was always kind of in the background. And we're like, yeah, that's in the past. And boy, that'll never happen. Like there was no talk ever of like doing it again. But like, I really don't know what the impetus was, but like at some point, late 2009 or so.
I think it was Steven.
Was it Steven? We saw each other. Me and Steven saw each other at was it the Stones?
At a party?
No, the Stones concert, I think.
Was it the
Stones?
Maybe.
Stones concert
in
the park. Know. I saw him after the show, and I hadn't seen him in like almost 10 years. And we were like, hey, man, that was amazing. Because the Rolling Stones, it was amazing. In Zilker Park in Austin. And so we kind of rekindled, we touched base and got back in touch. And so once that wall had broken down, then it was like getting back in touch with Frenchie again. And Frenchie and Steven had gone on to their own thing. They had great success with their band, Young Heart Attack. And so, I think even they had a falling out, during their time. And so it was really all four of us kind of repairing our friendships again.
It was so funny because Frenchie and I, and this is I've gotten professional help for this now, but grudge holder. I'm a German girl grudge holder. I'm doing my best. I'm trying to get better, but I hadn't talked to Frenchie for 10 years.
Wow.
I hadn't talked to him for 10 years.
Living in the same town, and Austin's still not as nuts as it is right now, right? But and sharing mutual friends, right? Did not talk for 10 years. And then, Jeff, Steven, whatever, we got it all together. We met at Steven's house and was like, oh my God, what am I going to do when I see Frenchie? What's going to happen? And he and I just looked at each other, and we both at the same time, I think, we just went, I'm real sorry, man. I love you. And it was just like everything, all that bullshit. It was a true Hallmark moment. Like all of the BS for me melted away. And there we were, just four people that had shared some incredible moments in our lives and some very intense moments. And it's just like, oh man, we're all still alive. I love you guys. It's great. Yeah. And then we realized it's like playing in 16 Deluxe. It's like riding a bike, it's really fun. It's fun. And we don't we can't do it with anybody else. Like we've all done different bands and different projects, but none of them sound like 16 Deluxe really, because they can't. Like only 16 Deluxe sounds like 16 Deluxe. And to me, I was like, what a shame for that sound not to exist, Yeah. Like I love for that sound to exist. When we get in a room together and we start making sounds, that's the only place that sound lives. Yeah. And so I don't want it to die, Like to me, it's like now I think about it, I'm like, my God, it can only live as long as the four of us are around, So as long as we're around, let's keep doing it,
Was it 15 years when you put Hit It out in 2015? Had it been 15 years since you'd recorded anything together? 16, probably, yeah. Yeah. One of my favorite 16 Deluxe tunes. Awesome. Amazing song. I like that song. And honestly is a little bit of a tease on you guys because just two songs you put out. Yeah. Let's have some more, guys. Come on. When are we booking studio time for the next 16 Deluxe recordings? It's tough. We've done some other demos and stuff. We've done a few things here and there, but it's really hard. It's just hard to find time. We all have we have lives and projects and all this stuff, but really I put the ball in Carrie's court because it's really up to her.
Hey, Carrie, right? She wrote 10 songs tomorrow that were 16 Deluxe.
I am gonna steal a quote from because I'm a total nerdy fangirl still. Watching an interview with Spiritualized, like a really old one, and they were just talking about Ladies and Gentlemen, just like groundbreaking record, right? And Jason was saying that it's like he finally was able to get the money to make and the resources to make the record that he wanted to make. And I think for us, it's like there's that punk playfulness and attitude, but we're sound nerds. And I think if we do a record, we know what we want it to sound like. And you can't do that in GarageBand.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
For something that I want to put like 16 Deluxe on, I want it to sound as close to what ELO sounded like to me when I was 7,
Yeah.
and that's an endeavor, I just think that we all have a very high standard of what we want to put our name on.
We'd rather do nothing than do something that would sully the sort of reputation, of the band, and just put something out just to put something out. It's like it's a high bar to get across to actually get to that point of like, okay, here's a song that sounds like 16 Deluxe. It's good enough.
Yeah.
And then we have the studio time and the time,
the time,
the lifetime, to dedicate to it. I will say this, it's Jeff and Keith, it's not for lack of desire, right? Because I think every time we talk, every time we hang out, we're always like, man, it'd be so great to do new stuff, record new stuff. But life just gets in the way,
Just know there's a super fan in Birmingham, Alabama that needs a new 16 Deluxe song every 3 or 4 years. I'm not asking for a full length here, just a little taste.
We could do that. We could make that a goal.
Stroke our egos a little bit.
Yeah.
We'll do whatever you want.
Yes. There's a fish tank in Jeff Calhoun's house that needs to turn into a psychedelic fire.
That's
I
right.
need your inspiration.
Fill your living room.
Absolutely.
That's good incentive. Good incentive.
Folks, thank you for joining us. It's I've been a fan since the launch of the band. Seen you perform live. Congrats on the Austin Hall of Fame thing. That's a nice honor. And congrats that you're still out playing gigs and enjoying one another.
Yeah, Carrie's got a great band called The Living Pins. I don't know if you're familiar with The Living Pins, but you should check them out.
Look this up. We're happening.
Right?
Everybody thinks we already have a label, but we don't. So, but Jeff recorded our first EP 2 years ago, and Frenchie recorded our 2 singles that were out last summer, and he's recording a bundle of 4 songs that we're going to do another EP, probably release in the fall. So
nice. Simon Le Bon is a big fan of theirs. So
yeah, Simon Le Bon's a big fan.
All right.
Shout out. Go check out The Living Pins.
All right. We
have a nice Instagram presence.
I love this. Well, again, thank you both for telling the 16 Deluxe story.
Thanks for asking us to do this, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah, this was fun. Thank you.
It was our pleasure. Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much, guys.
All right.
Bye.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Many thanks to Carrie Clark and Jeff Copas for their time. Thanks to the rest of 16 Deluxe too. Be sure to check out the show notes for links to most of the things mentioned in this episode.
Our theme song is Rocket Sled by Blip. Abandoned Albums was recorded at Thunder Love Studios.
Written and produced by Keith R. Higgins and Jeff Calhoun.
Engineered and mixed by Steve Beasley with the help of Mike Hunt. Edited by AJ Royce.
The 16 Deluxe songs you heard during this podcast were Mexico Train, Idea, Giver, Sniffy Woe, Honey, and Sebastian. You also heard a live cover of Gordon Lightfoot's classic Sundown. Be sure to check out the 16 Deluxe Bandcamp page. You can also stream their music wherever you stream your favorite songs.
Original music by Mike Pellegrino.
If you like what you've heard, please be sure to subscribe and leave us a rating. It really does help. Thanks for listening.
At Twitter, we are at Abandoned Albums, and on Instagram, we are at Abandoned_albums.
Grazie. Bailey Leaf. Rob Janicki. Mike Pellegrino. Thorina Vella. Ronnie Barnett, S.W. Loudon, Michael Janicki, Peyton Janicki, and our executive producer,
Rufus Thunderlove.
And now, until we meet again next time, I remain as always obediently yours.
Abandoned Albums is a production of Paw Print Media.